Magnus Carlsen has revealed a very simple, beginner-friendly and attacking system to play against the Sicilian defense. It starts off with the move pawn to b3, aiming to fianchetto the bishop to this active diagonal and put pressure on black's kingside long term. Now, one of the big advantages of the move pawn to b3 is that it immediately cuts off all the theory of the Sicilian defense, which otherwise would take you ages to consume. Now, after b3, black responded knight to c6. By the way, the black player is Rafael Leitao, also a strong grandmaster. Carlsen plays bishop b2, putting the bishop to this active position, and after black goes pawn to d6, another common Sicilian defense move, Carlsen goes bishop b5. It's also a super common move in this system. Now, here's the point. You put some pressure down here, but generally speaking, you don't mind trading off your light squared bishop in the system. Why? Because it just stands in the way of your other pieces, and we'll see why in a moment. So you're not shying away from trading here against the knight on c6, or in some lines against the bishop on d7 if black chose to cover his king that way. So black played bishop d7 anyway, and currently white goes pawn to f4, which marks the beginning of the Snyder variation of the Sicilian defense. Now, here we grab some space on the king side, which together with this long-term pressure of our bishop along the long diagonal creates pretty good conditions for our successful kingside attack in the middle game. And again, we'll see how exactly execute it in a couple moments. So black played pawn a6, white traded on c6, the bishop hits this pawn, therefore white develops a knight as well as defends it. Black goes knight f6 and attacks the pawn for the second time. White goes queen e2, defending the pawn for the second time, and also potentially getting ready to castle queenside, which is a useful idea. Now black plays e6 just to complete his development. Knight f3, bishop e7, so far it's all pretty standard. And now you've got a nice choice between castling kingside or queenside. Both moves are completely possible and completely good for white. However, castling queenside actually is more aggressive and has more benefits, and that's exactly what Carlsen did. Not only white has put his king to safety, but also we're getting ready to open up the d file so that our rook is getting active along this file. And black, anticipating that, played queen to c7, another standard Sicilian defense move. Now, this position you have two common breaks which starts your attack. These are either pawn d4, which is something that Carlsen played in the game, or pawn e5, and both of them are pretty good. Now, we'll talk about pawn d4 in a moment, that's what Carlsen played. How about pawn e5? Well, that is also a fairly decent option. You attack here, and after black recaptures, you land your knight on this really great outpost square. From here, it puts a lot of pressure on the black position, plus you still have this bishop standing in an ambush, always ready to join your attack, and life's cool. Carlsen chose a more classical approach, pawn to d4, opening up the center. Black traded, but now we've got another active knight on d4, plus our rook is active along this file. Black played rook c8, trying to put some pressure down this file, and after this, white goes pawn g4. That's another beauty of castling queenside. Now our king is not on the king side, and therefore we are free to chuck pawns forward and to develop our kingside attack. After black castled, we now go pawn g5. And from here, first of all, we just push back this knight from an active position to a more passive position. Plus, we simply start our pawn assault on the king side. Carlsen goes pawn h4, and actually, like, black's position is already fairly difficult, probably losing, just because you are ready to open up the position and to attack the king within just like 2 moves. And for black, it's nowhere near to create any counterplay and to even figure out what can black do to oppose that. Now, black played pawn b5 right here, trying to somehow create the counterplay on the queen side, and Carlsen here being fancy and played rook to e1 with some more intricate ideas. I mean, it was maybe not strictly necessary. I guess it was possible to be very straightforward and to just go g6, one of the common tactical ideas, to open up the king and just try to go for the kill right away. Now, black can't take with this pawn, because that would allow white to capture right here, forking the queen and the rook. Therefore, that's bad. Let's take it back. If instead black captures with his h-pawn, then after h5 we are ready to open up the file. You know, if he take, we recapture with the queen and we checkmate black within a couple moves. It looks really scary for black, and maybe it was a more straightforward way to play for white. However, instead in the game Carlsen played rook to e1, which is like a pretty deep move. Again, maybe not strictly necessary, but you know, Carlsen is a world champ, he wants to play fancy chess. So rook e1, what's the point? Well, white sees that black is going to play b4. Like, didn't play it in the game, but let's see why. So after b4 at first, looks like there are no good squares for the knight to go to, because all the forward squares are already controlled by black. And of course, you never want to undevelop your knight back to its original square, because, you know, it feels always bad to do that. However, Carlsen has prepared a tricky move, knight to d5. which temporarily sacrificed the knight, but now it turns out that we've got a discovered attack on his bishop on e7, plus we attack this bishop on d5. And if black, let's say, captures right here, we could take this bishop right away with a great game, and maybe that's what Carlsen would do, but also even stronger is to go knight f5 with a whole lot of threats. Now we threaten to capture this bishop by the knight, which will also fork the king and the rook. We threaten to grab the other one with the rook, and we also hit this pawn on g7 with our bishop standing in an ambush and our knight from f5. And it's just clear that black has a really hard time dealing with all these threats, and that's why black did not go for this variation. Now we can understand why black played rook e8, that mysterious grandmaster move, but it actually makes sense. So in that variation that we discovered, the bishop on e7 would be defended, and therefore I cannot go for it. So I played a3 to deter black from going b4 and kicking this knight away. Black played knight c5, trying to just go somewhere forward, but white just now rolls his pawns forward, and black is quite defenseless actually against this very simple attack on the king side. Black played bishop f8, but now pawn f6, and white is really starting the massive attack against the king. That's what your plan is in the Snyder Variation of the Sicilian Defense. You see that things are pretty simple. You fianchetto your bishop, castle queen side, and then you push your pawns badly on the king side. And although the plan is pretty simple, really difficult for black to counteract anyhow in this position. You see that black player is a strong grandmaster, and he got into this losing and really desperate position within just like the first 10 moves or so, and now he's desperately trying to mix things up, but nothing works out really. Anyway, he played pawn a5. He sees that he's got to do something very quick, otherwise white will, open up the position here completely and checkmate black. Therefore, black is trying to mix things up. a5 aims to push here somehow, seeking counterplay, but in reality it does not really work because this pawn on b5 is undefended and white can simply take it. Moreover, from here we attack the queen and this pawn. So black traded, knight takes b5, hitting the queen again. It's interesting that at first sight it looks like black can play knight takes b3, looks like a good move. But I guess that would be a common blunder for people to play in blitz, because knight takes b3 looks good, it's check to the king and the pawn is pinned. White cannot recapture. However, it turns out that white will just move the king away, and then black's attack is over. Now the queen has to move, and after that white simply picks up the knight. So that was bad for black, and black did not play this move. Instead, he just retreated the queen to b8. Now knight takes b3 threat is real, and Carlsen prevents this by going king to b1. Now still, this threat of pawn takes, again our bishop is active along this diagonal, pretty cool. Doesn't look like a strong attacking piece at first, but in reality you see that in many lines it takes a key role in our kingside attack. Plus we're always ready to push these pawns forward, and again black is trying to mix things up. He plays knight takes e4. Now Carlsen just plays pawn takes g7, attacking the bishop, and black also played a tricky move, bishop to e7. Now he could take right here, but after this exchange, the king would be completely open. And sometimes this technique is used when your opponent is trying to use your own pawn as a shoulder for his king. Again, black's been quite creative here. By the way, I gotta say that in this same tournament, Carlsen played 2 games against Leitao, and he won this game, which we're going over right now, and he lost the other one. So I wouldn't say that Carlsen was totally dominant against this opponent, and, he actually put up pretty good resistance here, and he's also trying to take chances and complicate matters. Anyway, now Carlsen grabs this knight, but black is grabbing the other knight on b5 in return. And here Carlsen played the move pawn a4. I mean, it's interesting how different players are different in style. I guess someone like Mikhail Tal would just go in a very straightforward attack against the king and would checkmate black within the next 5 moves. But Carlsen, being a more technical player, he always loves these kind of things, fixing this weak pawn on a5 so that in an endgame you can always grab it, and win the endgame. Anyway, this also gains tempo for attacking the queen, so it's a decent move to play. Black played queen c6, offering an exchange of queens. Carlsen does not want that because this king is extremely vulnerable and white really wants to checkmate it, so we don't want to trade queens, and Carlsen just played the move back. Now, white still threatens h5, g6, and this pawn g7, although shelters black to some extent, but also is annoying, it takes away a bunch of squares. Black decided to play e5 to block this bishop, and now Carlsen goes rook f1, taking aim at this weak pawn on f7. Black decided to take here on g7, and now there was another really interesting moment in the game. Now Carlsen played a good move queen f5, just attacking simply this pawn on f7, and it was a good move to play, and it was enough for white to develop a strong attack. However, he actually missed tactics which would win the game on the spot, and I'll give you a couple seconds to think about it. You can try to find tactics missed by the world champ. If you can do that, definitely you can take some credit. Now, of course, it's easier for you because you know that there is something in this position. Now, here's how you could come to this conclusion that these tactics may work out. Now, generally when you attack the king, you want to look for forced moves, which are checks, captures, attack, and moves. Now, how do you check the king? Now, there are not that many options, and one of them being rook takes f7, trying to open up the position around the king, and then followed by queen takes. At first, looks like a pretty promising thing for white to play, but then it turns out that the king can escape right here, and if you keep checking, the king escapes back there, and now you're down the rook for no big reason. So that fails. Although Carlsen missed these tactics, his position remained to be very strong. He played queen f5, just threatening to capture this pawn, and therefore black defends it with rook to f8. Now Carlsen plays a lone anticipated move pawn h5, threatening to break open the position on the king side somehow. Black plays rook c7, trying to consolidate, and here Carlsen goes rook d2. Also, Carlsen is not in a hurry. He sees that there is nothing black can do really, and rook d2 aims to first defend this pawn just in case, because black is putting pressure right here. And secondly, from d2, the rook can possibly be repositioned somewhere here to increase our pressure along the f-file. And again, black has not much to do really. In fact, nothing. So black played queen to d7, trying to offer an exchange of queens once again, but that fails to bishop takes c5. So here Carlsen did not miss this move. But frankly, here it was easier to find it. Now it's check to the king, and the pawn is pinned down to the queen, therefore black can now recapture it, otherwise he would lose the queen. Therefore, the king has to go, but now Carlsen just won one more pawn, and he's simply going for the endgame. Rook takes. Now, this pawn is under the attack. Carlsen defends it with rook to f5, and after rook to e8, Carlsen moved the bishop back to c3. From here, now we're attacking this pawn on a5 twice, which means that white is gonna win the second pawn in a row, and black just resigned. If you want to know how Magnus Carlsen punished the fried liver attack, check out this video right here. You probably encounter these really often. And if you want to know how to level up your positional understanding overall, check out this free masterclass by clicking the link over there. Have a great rest of the day.